Mr. Murdoch, welcome back. Thanks for coming back in again. So I know we slightly talked about this sort of stuff before when you came in and you were talking about Irish and you've talked about business and economics. At the moment, a lot of students have been asking us on the Instagram and on the YouTube and literally just actually in the corridors, could we do something to do with orals?
Yeah.
And we actually had absolutely no pressure. We had Katie in there last week and she was talking about the Spanish one. And a lot of students seem to help it out. Now we've come up with this new idea. At the end of this podcast, we're going to go through questions that were fired into the school Instagram and stuff like that. But first of all, obviously, guys, welcome. Thanks very much for tuning into this. We really hope this helps you. We've decided to really structure this podcast towards a student's point of view. What does a student have to know about this Irish oral? How much is it worth? How you do well? And obviously, we've got our expert teacher, Rónán Murdoch, in here, and he's going to tell you every single thing you didn't know and you didn't even know you didn't know, and exactly how to attack it in terms of going towards the Leaving Cert. Anyway, so Ro, thanks for coming in.
More welcome, mate. Thanks.
So first of all, I've literally no idea. I know I did one at school. Yeah. What is the Irish oral?
Right, actually, yeah. It's a good thing as well if you're looking at it from students that what happens in again, if you were 40% of your Irish grade. Thing as well, so it's a common grade. So if you're ordinary or high level student, the examiner won't know. So you're all pulled in the same mark. So and that's I think important for students to know. So if you're looking at the exam, a lot of students are doing high level Irish. The oral is going to be the part that will pull up their grade by far. So the average mark in paper 1 for students would be 56%. And you can get all this stuff online, even with the examiner's report. Like paper 1, the listening was and the essay combined of 56%. Paper 2, which is your reading comprehension, your poems, your stories, that was 68%. But then in your oral, the average mark in the oral is a H3 across the board for higher level students. So the oral is going to be the part of the exam that's going to pull your grade up. Okay, so it's one thing I just always try and encourage students to remember is that you should be confident going into the oral exam that's going to be your opportunity to actually drive your grade forward. And even just I can go into the rest of it later on. I could go on about it, but the way as well it happens is you walk in, you've got 5 marks for introducing yourself. You know your name, your age.
So what percentage is the oral worth over your overall grade?
Your overall grade is 40%.
40%.
40%. Yeah. Paper 1 is 27%, and paper 2 is 33%.
And this is 40% of the points you get at the end of the year for Irish. It's
40% of your marks, yeah.
So obviously this is where you should be putting most of your eggs.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I'd say to students now is they should be they should really prioritising Irish a lot now, and they should really work on it. And as well, if I was in my position getting ready for Leaving Cert now, I'd be looking at a lot of my essays. I'd be working very hard on my essays because you cover essays, especially with stuff writing to teenagers, like the pressure of leaving certain problems in society. You can use all those things. They'll complement your oral exam, the CERC oral, the open conversation very well. So if you can talk about the stress, or let's say you covered an essay in sport and how sport will relieve the pressure and help tackle mental health and stuff like that, you can crowbar all that stuff into your oral exam very nicely. And you remember you have a different examiner grade in your oral, so one to grade in paper 1, so you can recycle a lot of the same points and stuff. So I think it's a massive return for students. If I was doing my Leaving Cert now, I'd be pumping the essays and the oral as well. I put paper 2 a little bit on the back burner, in January, and you can get around that in April then.
So it's almost like a project that a continuous assessment or a project that you hand in. You got 40% before, but then you can actually use that project again on the day of the Leaving Cert. You can spread it out.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's
brilliant.
And that's what last year when we were setting the oral exams in our day school, especially, we were trying to push a lot of we were telling them going in, look, the examiner's going to push you on stuff like the health of young people, the pressure to Leaving Cert, drinking alcohol abuse. We were pushing those topics a lot in the students for the oral exam, because that was getting known in the mock orals, known then that they'd be able to use all the exact same stuff in their essays.
Yes.
Came around. And then the title last year in the Leaving Cert in the essay was "Young People Don't Look After Their Health." But that would have come up a lot of time in the oral exam as well.
Yeah.
So and the essay is 17% of your grade. So you nail the oral, you nail the essay, 57% of your paper there.
Yeah, for the same sort of study.
Yeah. So. And I don't want to get too much off base with it, but the essays where students, the average mark in the essay is around 55%. So lowly scored parts of the paper compared to the oral, where the average mark would be around 75%. Yeah. So, just factor that in when you're studying.
So, how does, you were getting into it there and I rudely interrupted. Yeah. How does the oral, so it breaks down, you go in, what's the crack with it?
You 15 minutes, you walk in and the first part is your introduction, 5 marks, and they just ask you your name, your age, date of birth, where you live and stuff like that. In your student exam number, that's easy enough, that's fine. And then the next thing after that is you'll have to read out a poem. So the examiner will pick out any 5 poems. Now the student can bring the page in the day of the exam.
Yeah.
And it's 5 easy enough poems. You can write whatever you want. You can spell out the poem phonetically if you like, anything like that. You read out the poem, and very, very easy. If you put in a good bit of work, it's quite easy to get full marks on that. You're organised, and a diligent student will. They'll get the 35 or 34 to 35. So it's the main reason this is it settles you very nicely. So you can go in, you nail the first step, introduce yourself, then you nail the poems. You read out the poem, which takes like 1 minute. Then you've got 40 marks, out of 240. So
yeah,
and it's nice psychologically then, I think, for students. They're like, right, nailed that, then I can move on to that. It's mad how it works as well. Like, even I'd stress this to students, that sometimes they can hammer themselves on studying the poetry, but in the Leaving Cert, you've 5 poems that come up and in paper 2, and the 5 poems, whatever happens in the poetry's worth 30 marks in paper 2. But then in your oral exam, reading out a poem in 1 minute for 35 marks.
Yeah.
So it's mad, like, the students should be, sometimes students can kill themselves studying the poetry, and it's only 5% of their grade.
Yeah.
And then they might go in and they might not cover the poem that well, where they really should be rootless to the poem, drill that inside out, so you get your 35 to 35 there. So yeah, that's what I'd see as well. It's a big fall.
How many marks overall is the Leaving Cert Irish grade for paper 1 and 2?
600. I get you. Yeah, so combined. So
you get 40 out of 600 marks. I'm not trying to be funny here or talk it down whatsoever, by telling them where you live, your exam number, and reading something off a page.
No. They get to it 10 times harder. So.
No, but just to begin with.
40 marks.
Yeah, 40
that's
marks.
literally it. Yeah, that's fine. But going back to, I'll kind of go through later.
You obviously have to say it gets harder here, but that sounds really okay.
No, it's fine then. So going through, so you've got 4 steps. Introduce yourself, that's fine. Picture sets, the reading out the poems, that's the next step. So we're on 40 now. The next then is the circle, or the open conversation, right? That lasts about 8 minutes. And that's 120 marks out of 240. So it's like 20% of your overall Leaving Cert grade. So 120 marks, circle roll. They'll start off with your close environment, and then you're intimate with your friends, yourself, your area, your family, and then they move into like other issues then, where they could talk about harder topics. Like they'll test you in your tenses, what you want to do next summer or last summer, and that lasts for about 8 minutes. And then at the end, you'll have 4 minutes then for your picture sets, and there's 20 picture sets you have to cover, and the examiner will hand you an envelope, and you'll pick out one of those. You can't see them, obviously. You'll pick out one from the envelope, and be whatever one out of the 20 you get. You'll have to describe what's happening in that picture set, and you'll have 3.5 minutes to do it, and that's worth 80 marks then at the end. Yeah. So there's a lot in that, I know. So
that's fantastic. First of all, to have a structure like this. So just to recap, so you have 15 minutes. It's worth 40% of your entire grade. You go in, and of this 240 marks that you get for this oral, 5 marks for your introduction and your exam number, 35 for reading a poem, which you can practice and write stuff on beforehand.
Yeah, you can walk in with your own thing.
Yeah. Then you've 120 marks for this open conversation, which you said starts off in your close environment, and I think it kind of branches out there. About 8 minutes on that.
Yeah.
So you can literally practice that until the cows come home. Put in your different tenses and stuff. Almost like do that, and then 4 minutes for the picture set. With this picture set, you said there's 20, and you pick one. Do you see those beforehand?
No, you just you do. You get the 20 in advance, and you'll be practicing them during the year. Now they're quite tough, because each picture set will have like 6 little pictures, and basically have to tell the story of what happened. I advise students to tell the story in the past tense, because the past tense is the easiest one. Well, most students will find it the easiest anyway, but you're allowed to do it in the present as well if you want. So like the past tense, I think most students will go with that. Then you just go through the story, you just explain what happened. And the main thing I advise students, and we can kind of get into it later on, because like the questions they'll ask, but like big thing the examiner's looking at is that when you're telling a story, you nearly have to imagine the examiner's never seen the story ever, and can they follow what's happening? So like for example, one of the picture sets, like God Eat Their Train, like they've got you've got a lad basically robs this woman's purse. Okay, so you have to tell the story of the lad basically robbing her purse, and you have to assume that the examiner, if the examiner can't even see the picture, could he follow what was going on God Eat Their Train? Would he be able to spot, would he be able to follow the story? Really?
Okay. Oh yeah. So basically you're planning it out as if the exam, you've randomly met the examiner, you're telling them something that happened earlier, and you can use the pictures as guidance of what's going on.
Yeah, and you tell the examiner story. And you nearly have to imagine that this and the examiner's never seen this picture set. Yeah. And you have to think, right, the way I'm telling, that's the key thing, they're looking for the communication, like the way I'm telling the story, will the examiner be able to follow what's happening? Okay, so ahead of kind of learning off these mad fancy phrases and complicated phrases around like that, just get the basics right with that.
Yes.
And like sometimes students will leave out mad parts like about your man would rob the purse. Yeah. They leave that out. You can't, it's just, they might be nervous or whatever, but just that's the key things you want to get. So I'd advise students if they're studying to nearly when you see a key element of the story, if there's ever a key twist in the story, draw circles around, draw arrows into and highlight that. So then if they open up in the daily exams, you got it, they're right, no matter what, I've got my 3 key points that I have to mention in that story. Yeah. To make sure you get that in at the start,
Fantastic. So say, for example, what date is the oral? Or around, when are they?
They'll have it then, they'll have it on I think it's early April there, so it's, I'll have to check the dates there on it. So
but
falls end of March, early April.
So obviously it depends on the school, So obviously each school is different, but that's when they have it. So again, it's a good chunk before the Leaving Cert, as we discussed, so it's separate than that. Now, say, for example, let's just pretend I've only taken up Irish right now. Now, I know that's not the true case, but a lot of people maybe are only starting to focus on the oral stuff now. How would you express, maybe a student that's not in your class, what would you say for them to go ahead and start doing?
Right, so the angle, if a student's really starting off from scratch here, the main thing I would advise is there's a couple of students, like students who are aiming for the H1s and then students who are kind of wanting to get, let's say a H3 or H4 or whatever. So the thing I stress is that if you're coming in from scratch, I'd nearly advise, if you're starting off and you're maybe aiming for H3 or H4, get the basics right. We saw chase the easy 40 marks, introducing yourself, get the poems right. Then with the circle, get the basics right. Make sure you can discuss your friends, your family, your neighbourhood, your school. You've got stuff on the tenses, like last weekend, next weekend, and be a bit on the ball. Like if you're going in the Monday, bigger chance of last weekend. Going in the Friday, what are you doing this weekend? Have things ready for Easter holidays, your Patrick's Day, and just get the tense right, and then stuff like next summer. That's like the GAR hymn look. That's like your close environment that they'll look for. And then if you can get those basics right, and then that's where the bulk marks are. Then I'd look over the picture sets, and with the picture sets, the big thing to do is sometimes students can end up nearly learning it off far too much, and because students will panic a bit because they're like, oh God, it can be any random 20, and they can end up rewriting essays for each of the 20 picture sets. And whilst that's good, that's going to benefit your Irish, I don't think it's a very efficient use. Some students love it and it can help them study. I don't want to knock it at all, but this is kind of a close stage to Leaving Cert. I would not be writing out loads and loads of picture sets because you're very inefficient. To write out each one, it might take an hour or whatever, so it can be very, very time consuming. That could be 20 hours you're spending. You don't really have that luxury this time around the Leaving Cert. So if I was doing the picture sets in an efficient way, I'd open up and say right, make sure I got my basic verbs right in the past tense, and then I'd say as well, I'd have keywords on the picture sets, so make sure these are key bits of vocab that I need to make sure I have. One other thing you could look at as well is in the picture sets, some of them will have lots of text, and you can actually build sentences around the text. So they might give you the keyword in the actual picture itself, and then you can be right, I'm going to be study smarter here and build a little sentence around those keywords. Only tiny little thing I would stress, and every student is different, but there's about 2 or 3 picture sets that are fairly tough, and even you get anything. Even if I was doing it the Leaving Cert, I because the stories can be very boring sometimes and nothing can happen in them. So you nearly have to warn your students, prepare yourself for the worst case scenario, and the 3 or 4 that are really tough, focus a lot on them because it's random. You can pick out any random one. So even what we did last year with our 6 years in the day schools, I picked out the 5 horrible ones, and we used to just throw in loads of extra ones in the envelope. So I was telling them in advance, I'd say, look, in the Leaving Cert you'll have 20 in the envelope. You'll notice you might have 40 here because we put in 5 of these horrible ones, and you get filthies off the students. They'd be hating it, but it benefits them so much because then when it does come out, and they're given an incentive then to drill the hard ones very well, and then when they come up, then they're not as badly covered. So I'd strongly advise that. Get ready, cover yourself for worst case scenario. If there's any picture set you hate, Murphy's Law, you probably end up picking out that one out in your Leaving Cert. So
I was under the impression before we had this conversation that you went into an hour, you just started speaking, you just started chatting.
No,
but obviously, look, it seems very, very structured.
Yeah, and the question. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
So no, just in the way you said it there, for me, thinking if I had to do this, okay, I know that I'm going for the thing to begin with, and then I've built up around my essays because that's helped me for the Leaving Cert, and then Then you attack the pictures. If you're anxious about any one of them, you've actually given ideas for that. But the other thing is then you can actually practice each individual part of it.
Yeah.
It's not like, say if you went into a football match, you're not really too sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Here you kind of know, no matter what, this is this amount of time,
order,
this is So that's actually quite well for me. That would like take away any.
Oh, it is. Yeah,
anxiety
it's
from
very.
that.
It is very reassuring in that way. It's very, very structured, and like even with the questions and like with questions that the examiners ask, like they tend to not really lead in with a question like straight away say, tell me about your dad or something or anything like that, because you don't know people's personal. So it's usually just a very broad question to start. Inish dom food féin, and then you answer the question, then you lead it from there. And they don't really, they don't see questions like, do you like the school, do you like the principal in school, because you don't know what answer the student's going to give. So they're kind of fearing off those types of,
keep it very vanilla.
Like they do that, so like you can kind of let students be aware of that in advance, like it's broad stuff, tell them about your area, tell them about and then whatever information you volunteer, then they can go into that. But just be careful with that, like in the broad question there, like inish dom food féin, like if you start saying you might just randomly throw in, I have a dog, Bran a Sando or something, they can say, where'd you get Bran, was he a present, did you take him a walk and that, and then suddenly the student will be like, geez, I've been thrown in the deep end at this a bit. So be factoring in that any bit of information the examiner can latch on that and they can dig with that, and that's when they can find out your standard of Irish. I would factor in those, like keep it at the start, get your very basics, your close environment covered. Like even we saw the examiners last year, both examiners that came in, they said, look, you aren't getting any of these questions on Brexit. Like first examiner reassured them a lot. He said, look, I've no interest in Brexit. I'm not going to ask you guys about that. If you want, if the conversation goes that way, you can educate me on it, that's fine. But don't worry, I'm not going to be trying to throw out those sort of things. So use that. Like I think a lot of students are hearing these horror stories of like they walked in and one's like, how do we fix the health or even that's the mad hard stuff. It doesn't fall like that really. So
I suppose like if someone has probably maybe led themselves that way, and then as you said, the examiner latched onto that and asked them about that specific thing, and the student's shocked, that's the student that's going to tell 50 people that that's what happened. Whereas the most students just like, I know it's fine, and then no one cares. It's like no one talks about it, and it gets blown out of proportion.
Yeah, you exaggerate as well and all that sort of stuff. So it's just the way it goes. Yeah, so I found like just even last year, there's no like really horrible questions they got asked. Like some students could end up like steering the conversation down angles that they mightn't have wanted to go down. Like I think one lad last year ended up like making them like just whatever he said he said some story about him having a farm and down the country, and all this was seriously made up on the spot and stuff. I don't know how the conversation went to end there, but he just said some things and the examiner said, oh, do you have a farm or something, and whatever happened. So that's the sort of things that you want to be quite careful of. But even with that, like I remember that student told me about the oral. I remember thinking it was a disaster, and then I met him when the results came out and he told me he got 80%. We can see all the results online. Now he was telling me he got, as far as he was concerned, he got 50%. So it's, and I always tell my students, I won't say his name now, but I always tell my students, like, this lad asking me, he doesn't know him, like, he'll tell you it was an absolute horrific oral exam. And even the way he told me, I remember thinking in my head, oh, this lad, it didn't go that well. But he naturally had a lot of Irish, and that's where his Irish shone through, and that's what the examiner spotted above everything else. So
brilliant.
Just don't panic. Like no matter what, if you're in the exam, don't, even if the conversation's going down a tough area, just don't let that knock you. Just you're all right.
In terms of, like you said, your general, what was it called again? General. Gar Himplucht. What should I? Can you give me like four topics that I can prepare?
Yeah, sure. Like my féin, my canter, my clon.
Can you say it in English?
Sorry, myself, my area, my family, my school, right, and then my hobbies. Like they always float around those things. Like so, you'll see the bulk of your questions there and that, and they can ask you like, what did you do at the weekend in your area and stuff like that, and your school can be. They'll ask you stuff like, do you like the school? They might ask you to compare 5th year to 6th year, anything like that. They're going to be like, duration of hard test after Leaving Cert, what you want to do and stuff. So that's all considered your close environment. Sport, and look out for, if you're a H1 student as well, I find a lot of these students get asked this, is like, they might say, like, imagine if I've sat down and I've learned out my amazing answer on hurling, right, and I've got loads of stuff to say that. They might ask you some question like, all right, well, if it was raining, what would you do? Or if you were injured, what would you do? And that's then how they throw you out the comfort zone. So a few of my students were on the ball this last year, where we were kind of drilling it into a bit, but like, we were saying, like, leave out a hobby. So if you've got 3 hobbies, put one hobby aside, like reading, and don't volunteer that. And then the examiner, especially if you're a really good student, they're like, right, if you, without hurling and without, without hurling and music, what would you do? And then the student can go into the angle of the reading, which they've been quite well prepared. So
yeah, so they can manipulate it for themselves.
100%, yeah. Now, only really if you're H1 or H2, you're very good. It's a compliment if the examiner's doing that, because the examiner has to justify why they gave you the H1. So they're like, right, I'll try to make the comfort zone. I'll ask them this tough topic that they mightn't have prepared, and see how they handle that. So if you can get that done, that can help you a lot as well, definitely.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
You mentioned something earlier about when you threw a load of extra pictures into the envelope.
Yeah.
So obviously you were saying that, practicing this and giving it a go is obviously pretty important.
Yeah.
What would you recommend on that front? Because maybe I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. I know maybe if I was an Irish teacher, I'm teaching X amount of students. There's only so many.
What I find works best is if you're, let's say, most students at this stage, they're Irish be quite good. Otherwise, they'd have dropped down to ordinary level. So if you're being realistic where we are in January, decent Irish. What I would do if I was in my position, let's say if I'm floating around a H3, I'd open up a picture set and I'd have a nice, well organised, like whatever, A4 hardback, and I'd cover everything else. I'd look at the picture set. So imagine this is the picture set here. All the pictures are there. I'd go through it in my head in English, and I'd be like, right. Go through it in Irish in my head, right? But then once I find a word or a place I'd stumble, and if I can't remember the Irish for a certain word, I'd write it down on my page. And then you're basically playing through. A quick way of doing it, you play it out in your head, try and find where you're weak. And if you can't remember a verb in Irish, you look it up, and then you build it on your thing. Yeah. And you keep doing that. So then when you're studying, you've got like 20 pages done at the end of the year, or after a couple of weeks. And none of these mad long learned off answers, but it's just like, right, picture set 1, picture 1, and the key words you missed. Picture 2, the key words you missed. Picture 3, and then it's, then you're studying that way. I find that's from what I've seen from students studying, that is the most efficient way of doing it. And also on top of that, they're not. I think students are overemphasizing how strict they are at the grading. I think they're not. There's none of this. Every sentence has to be this incredibly complicated, real fancy Irish. None of that stuff.
It's conversation. It's not how you speak in real life.
Yeah, explain how you explain in English. Sometimes students are purposely trying to learn these mad complicated sentences for the picture sets, and I think it's mad. There's 20 picture sets. There's only 5% chance you can use it, and learn off the mad complicated phrase for your essay if you want to stand up. But you're on the spot. It doesn't work like that. So simple, direct. We had students last year doing ordinary level Irish, and they got 90% in the. Now they were very good students, and they had they dropped down Irish because they were doing higher level maths and all that sort of stuff. But they honestly hadn't worked it. They were jittery. They knew they were going to pass it. They weren't using it for points. They naturally had really good Irish from 5th year. They're doing higher level and stuff like that, and they went in and got above 90%. So they hadn't learnt off any of those mad complicated phrases. They didn't overthink it, and that stood to them too.
What do you think is the biggest fear that you notice, or the biggest obstruction to someone doing well in the oral that you see over the years?
I think again, I find writing out notes and then writing out these most amazing notes, and not actually the easy way to study. I think we've even spoken this before. The easy way to study is sit down writing out notes. The hard way is actually putting yourself in exam position, closing off your book, not looking at anything, and just having a blank A4 page before you, and actually trying to write. Same idea with the oral. The harder way to study is actually asking yourself a question and talk about that topic for 30 seconds. That's where that's where students can. Sometimes students can write out amazing notes and can psychologically look great. They've got all this certain notes, but then when it comes around to the Leaving Cert and they don't know any of it, or they can't articulate it in the point, all those notes are fairly useless. So I think the biggest mistake students do is they don't actually sit down and put themselves in an exam case scenario and ask themselves a question and have to actually answer it in the spot. Even if you don't have somebody who's really good at Irish in your family or anything like that, you can still go up to your room and then write have a list of 10 questions and then ask yourself the question, play the question out in your head and discuss it. And I had students before who'll use stopwatches, they're telling me, and they'll be like, right, I discuss that for 30 seconds straight. And then when they get confident, they push up to 45 and stuff. And that's what I think is the best way to study. It's not pretty though, because you're making mistakes, you're stuttering and stuff. But you have to, that's what's going to happen in your Leaving Cert in the oral exam. You have to play that scenario out. So I think by far, if I could, and even if if I could like help students now and going to the oral, if I was doing like anything there, I think so much benefit comes from doing mock orals because you're just in the exact same situation. So I had a student and I said like, they said, look, you've 20 minutes to help this lad out for high level Irish. I'd give them a mock. And that way, just nothing, and then give them a bit of feedback and say, start learning this off. But if I'm sitting there then for 20 minutes saying, this is how you say I like my hot, they're not benefiting from that much. Like exam case scenarios, play the questions out in your head, repeat that constantly, and you'll do quite, you'll benefit from that.
I think it's not at the same time as well. As sometimes students, they feel you might feel that you're doing something. Everyone does it in life, and you're kind of kidding yourself. Like I was in study the other day. And I saw a student, basically in maths, they have the solutions. And this wasn't homework or anything, so I wasn't going to correct it. It was just they were doing another question. And they literally had the solution there. And I saw them writing down the exact solution.
Yeah.
And then, no joke, they went over, picked up another pen, got the red pen, and wrote a tick beside it. Yeah. But for themselves, because I was never looking at that. But they were like, oh no, I know that now. But they literally just that could be, Latin that they copied down. So the point that you made there is being awkward, the not pretty part of it, is what allows you to perform on the day.
And being honest, but I went through this. Like I did the way you're talking there. That's how I studied for I repeated here, and I didn't do well the first time at all. Like I was 17 doing my leaving cert the first time, immature, doing all that sort of crack, and it wasn't nice on the results day. I got the results, and all my friends nailed it, and I didn't do terrible, but I remember thinking I could have done better if I actually was more mature about it, and then I had to go through the hassle of repeating. But when I repeated, I was just a different person. Like I was so much more focused, and I knew, especially when I knew of like not getting my course, all that sort of crack, I just drilled. I studied a completely different way. I didn't even have to be told. I knew what I did the last time was just kidding myself.
Yeah.
And then and nothing made me mature quickly. Then seemed like everyone else get what they wanted, and me knowing I hadn't done the work. Like what you said, I was studying that way. Like that was the way it is. I used to do it like I remember translating the business book from English into Irish, but that's no benefit, but that's the way I used to write it notes and be like, because I was in Closh on or whatever, like, oh look at the amazing work I did today. No benefit for the Leaving Cert though.
What's if you were to give 1 or 2 points for a H1 student to, what would that be? What would it be?
H1, right, the first thing is work in the Mocha look naturally. So like you try and be like if you're doing any answers, like try and like if you're, let's say, talking about your school, say like something like, oh, if they ask you, do you like your school? Like at the end they'll ask you like the Mocha, like the condition, like what would you do if you were the principal of this school? But they ask that at the end of the questions a lot. Not trying naturally working into your normal topic. So like when they ask about your school, do you like the school? Talk about the school, but then say something like, Dom free video. If I was the principal, I would do this. Working in naturally things like the Mocha look stands out. Work the Tischel Ginlook into a few answers. H1, your Irish though as well, it's like getting the language just shines through. They do know it. So like you can nearly have a student learn off an essay and get away if they get relooked the titles. In Irish though, the oral, and this is kind of be positive as well as a confidence boost. Even if you're a H1 student and you think the oral's been a disaster, it hasn't. Like the examiner can see how good your Irish is naturally. So if you mess up 1 or 2 little questions, not that big a deal. And they still naturally see your Irish. So like going back though, I get the basics right as well. Like your picture sets, the thing you do at the end, the 20 pictures, that has to be 3.5 minutes. And that's like the examiner will cut you off. So if you're like halfway through it and you're 3.5 minutes, they'll stop you, and that's a big problem for the H1 students because they have so much to say. So you nearly have to be saying to them like, right, sit down, time it, done 3 minutes, 3.5, be efficient with it. That's what I'd be saying on that. So they're really it. And then one last thing on H1 students, have something different. If you've anything, like if you one lad I think played last year, he was in the grinds, but he played cricket for Ireland, he's gone for H1, but I remember the stuff he was saying and that it was just completely stood out. You leave a big impression on the examiner. Like think about it, like you have the conversation, the examiner leaves the room, then they're marking how you got on. So like you've got different Irish, different ideas, the conversation goes down a different way, you're efficient, you've got all your picture sets nailed and stuff like that, you'll get your H1.
Perfect.
And one last thing I would stress on that, if I was aiming for H1 on my Leaving Cert, I'd never say to students, oh, if you're getting 220, that's great. In the oral, you have to be getting around 230 to 235 out of the 240. Because remember I said earlier about paper, the listening is very tough. And then the paper 1's very tough. So the oral is going to be the part that pulls up your grade. So like if you get 90% in your oral, or let's say you get like a low 90, it's very, very hard to to keep that up
keep the
across the tail
balance,
to H1. So you shouldn't be happy. If you're aiming for H1, you need to be getting like 235 plus. Like they gave it out. Like we had a few students last year getting 240 out of 240 and 239 and stuff like that. And actually like 10 of them at least got over like 235. You know, and that's just that's where you have to be at, I think, for the orals. Rootless with them.
Subjects and the sheer focus of what's important in terms of grade and percentage on, and the way you talk about that, the way you say, listen, you have to be at this standard for that, because the other one, looking at the average to get pulled up. I think that's because at the end of the day, everyone really cares about the grade. Like that's what they want. Obviously, like, the subject can be great if they go and study it, but to really focus on, right, you have to be unbelievable here. Put all your time and effort into this sort of stuff. And it's not as important about the other stuff. I think it's good. But on the complete opposite of that, just as a brief one, what's the crack with ordinary level? Same percentage?
Yeah, same percentage, same exam. The only thing I'd advise for ordinary level maybe is just really just drill back, get your basics right. And something simple, like even if you were to listen, like some students are doing last year, in ordinary level, I thought it was quite clever as well. They're just literally, and some higher level students as well, geez, it's across the board, it benefits massively. Is that like they were actually just listening to, like they had their AirPods in or whatever, and they're just listening to like an old listening comprehension. And it's a really clever move to get your head tuned for the Irish. Just listen to Irish for 20 minutes before going in. Just you're that bit sharper on the questions then. And I'd stress that across the board, even for higher level students. Like it was tricky. Like last year, I remember watching them at the orals, right? And there were some students they're kind of all hanging around the common area. You give them a bit of leeway. You can't be like, go back to class, blah blah blah, because they're nervous too. So you don't want to be, don't be too strict. But like I remember seeing it that like the common area, a lot of times students are trying to study for their oral in the common area. And what was happening was a lot of the students kept coming back saying, "Oh, I got asked this question. I got asked this question." And I think that, like, if it's a relaxed conversation, they're having a laugh, or that's good because they're relaxed going in. But this stuff of like students standing around talking English, saying, "I just got asked this. I just got asked this," it doesn't really benefit. You're not going in sharp. So like I remember just pushing them all the time, being like, "Go into that." Remember we had the separate room put aside for them. It's like go in there, only talking Irish in there. And even if you want, then just listen to being an Irish. You have to be talking Irish 10 minutes before you go into the exam. You have to just get the idea of
warming up.
It's
get
like
the sounds.
Football match ends. You're warming up. That's all it is. Like.
Yeah, I was the same with maths. I always have to do a couple of sums before you go.
I see you doing the thing.
That's fantastic. We actually just on that room.
Yeah.
I remember going back into that room. There's a lot of fingernails on the ground. But listen, that's disgusting. But listen, people get nervous. They do weird things. Could have been a toenail. Could have been mine. Okay. But today, actually, it's fantastic. We got a lot of questions in, Ro, from a lot of students. You seem to be a popular man on a few different things. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions from the Instagram. And on any of our podcasts from now, feel free to fire them in. We do them to obviously facilitate what the students are looking for. So first of all, and forgive me if I pronounce some of these things incorrectly. Question? No, so we've got this thing, shra. Okay, so a question from Tara. Thanks, Tara. Says, if you were able to make up the shra picture, I suppose, is that a pronounce that correct? On the spot, would you advise it? Usually, probably last year, I'd have said you can get away with it a little bit. I wouldn't, because last year the order was the picture sets fell before the open conversation. So you had plenty, you had a lot more time. But now they've moved it, the open conversation comes first and the picture sets comes at the end. Why did they do that? Mainly because students are talking too much in the picture sets. Then they weren't getting enough time for the conversation. And that was a big gripe to that. So they switched it around. And the reason why now that would be a problem, if you're trying to learn it off on the spot, you've only got 3.5 minutes. So you could end up if you're talking on the spot 3.5 minutes and you're kind of going as far as making up, not making up, but you're going through it as you see it, like you mightn't get it done in 3.5 minutes. So usually I think I'd avoid that as much as I can. If you can come up on the spot, practice it. Like sit down, do a few of them, time yourself. If you think it's up to standard, you're quick going through it, then that's fine. Main thing, you're telling a story. But you might spend too long, or maybe even too little. Too long, you don't finish it, and then you're down marks. And then that's it. Yeah. Okay, cool. Now this one, I'm not sure, she might get extra marks here because she's got a. Just before that, just see the second question there is does fluency, although important, sound better? Are you reading my questions? Sorry, don't let Tara down. She's two questions. Who's in charge here? Tara's already got one of hers answered there. Dylan, I'll take from here. Tara, you got one, right? Hey, you want to let it off? Sorry. Right. So Tara also asks, does fluency, although not necessarily fast, sound better than learnt off stuff?
And but you know, the only on that, like they learnt off stuff. They know they've learnt it off in advance. Like they know 90% of the stuff has been learnt off in advance. So like sometimes students with the picture sets would worry a bit too much if it's learnt off. The main thing, just to go back on that, is that just with the picture sets, is that like as long as you explain the story, that's the key thing. If it's a bit fast, that's okay. Fluency is good, but the main thing is just make sure you keep the story. They follow the story through, and don't worry too much about learnt off stuff. They know it's all been learnt off. Like it's H1 students in Irish speaking schools would, to some degree, just learn off the story as well. Like imagine you were doing it in English, you'd learn it all. You'd have an idea of what way you're going down. So don't worry about the learnt off stuff. That's what I'd say. Anyway.
Okay. I can't really make this joke anymore because you ruined it, but I was going to say maybe this girl got an extra mark because she put a photo on her. So Siobhan here, it was funny. It was going to be funny a few minutes ago.
I know,
listen, it's
gone. Fine.
How long do we have to tell the stories, and how long for the questions? I think you already covered this, but we might as well.
4 minutes. So you've got you roughly give yourself 3.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes max for the stories, and then they ask you the questions at the end. So
perfect.
You've got 3.5 minutes for the stories, and they're very strict on that, and they can cut you off as well.
Yeah. And then you said 8 minutes then for the
open conversation.
For the open conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then it's obviously 3 minutes for the introduction and
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So thanks, Siobhan. Leah. So Leah here, still on the SHRA. Are the SHRAs based on how good your Irish is or how well you deliver them?
So the SHRA there, so how well your Irish is, it's both really. Like they're looking at
so like if you're animating, you got talk.
No, it's like the communication, and then like especially if there's a delivery, like it's not, you don't have to but if there's a key part, you stress that. The main thing is that like if there's a key moment in the story, you spot that, you make that clear and stuff. But so just look. I just want to check it again. The SHRA based on how well you deliver them. Going back in that question, like I said earlier, if you just had it there, imagine they couldn't see the script in advance. So imagine the examiner, random examiner, and you're telling them a story. Make sure you don't leave any key part there of the story, and that's more important than any fancy phrases. Sometimes students will try and work in mad complicated Irish and really fancy description of the person in the story, but they might leave out that they broke their leg or something like that or whatever. So key parts of story, that's what they're going to be looking for there. That's above all else. So that's
perfect.
And one tiny thing is just with the Irish, make sure you get the basic verbs right. And what I'd stress as well is when they're looking at your Irish, one good thing is rather than trying to learn everything off by heart, I try and say with 20 picture sets, have 2 really fancy phrases that you can work in. So that's only 40 you have to learn off. But if you're organised on it, you'd be like, right, in the first picture set I know this really good phrase I'm going to use, and the last picture set I know this really good phrase I'm going to use. And I'd always try and advise as well, there's in each picture set there's 6 pictures. Get them very well organised, and the last one especially, because the last picture set is sort of like going to have a big impression on the examiner, because then you're just basically out, after that. So trying to have a fancy phrase or 2, a shannockle or something like that, will go a long way on that. Yeah.
I just noticed here we actually have 5 worksheets and audio downloads for students to practice on YouTube and on our website in the notes section. So check out that notes section for a bit more help on that. Yeah. That's fantastic. Did you make that?
No, Shane did. They're excellent as well. Yeah, so their students are going mad for more of them. So
that's fantastic. Fair play to them.
And that's they're really, really good. So,
okay. Some questions on just general. It says here for questions from Leaving Cert 2021. Was the person's name. The name is 2021. So you're Leaving Cert 2021. You're trying to get our material and then release our podcast. That's okay. But what should you do if you blank?
Be honest and just say the Broner to make Trace Darmody and Gockrut, and Fader and Kesh Currish. Like if you draw up, nothing's worse than just sitting there. It's painful for you, and if you think it's been 10 seconds, it'll feel like an hour near. Just no matter what, be straight out, say out the Broner, and they know that. Like, they know you're nervous, and you can even there. You ask me a question, I just answer in English. I just completely drew a blank like that. Happens, so don't worry about that. Just say Broner to make Trace Darmody and Gockrut and Fader and Kesh Currish. And the examiner then might talk a little bit, they might ask a bit of an easier question, but they know straight away, move away from there. They're not these, they're on your side, they're there to give you marks.
Do you reckon that like some parents said, we just had a kid, they're going to do their Leaving Cert in 2021, that's actually someone's name, Leaving Cert 2021 O'Donnell, or something like that? That's great. That's great. What about Lauren? Lauren, all these questions from girls. That kind of like as a teacher, I
mostly
understand
girls doing high level Irish.
The lads don't care.
Lads will come in and nay. Lads be like, "Nay, I'm fuck here." So, at the end here, so you always see the lads in May in the crash course as well.
Yeah, in tears. Yeah. no. Yes. No, it's great. It's good to have this. They're doing the hard. So, question from Lauren: what are the best ways to work around answering questions you haven't prepared?
Okay, so question you haven't prepared, what I would advise, get the very basics right. Like if they ask you a question about like something like, let's say if you say, like I said earlier, if you say you have a dog or something like that and you can't rediscuss that, they would expect you higher level Irish, you want to get a high, a good grade, you should be able to discuss, your basics on the dog. So what I would stress is, first thing you want to do, get the basics right on all the 5 things, like your area, your school, your family, your friends, your hobbies and stuff like that. But then if they ask you a tough question and you have, like it's kind of a bit of a random one that you hadn't really prepared to say, the Broner, ní mórna rós go mar over sin, to me Lorna Hortest, Philor. So at the moment, you say like I'm middle leaving at the moment. I don't know too much about that subject.
Yeah.
To me Lorna Hortest, Lorna Hora, ní mórna rós go mar over sin, and Gamaleshka. That's fine. And I only said that. So just say, look, I'm middle leaving cert last year, Lorna Hortest, and then or this year, and then just I don't know too much on that subject, and they'll know to steer away. It's not that bad. Like it's.
Yeah. It's good to have the answer.
Just your whole. As long as you're keeping the conversation moving. So was that? Yeah, just the best way to answering a question. I'm prepared. Yeah, but then try and anticipate as well. It does boil down to preparation. Like the more times you go in, do mock orals and stuff like that, the more times you will be found out with questions, and that's good because then you know where you're a bit weak. Yeah. So like even if your friends are doing orals, ask them like if your friend said, "Oh, I got caught out in this question about your whatever it was," like I wasn't ready to my hobbies, or they asked me to go to a concert and I didn't know how to say where I bought the tickets. Well, you should be noting that and saying, "Well, that could happen to me as well." So that's what I would say. Try and anticipate it. Like especially if you say a sport. Like they'll ask you what position you play, when was the last game you played, did you won it and is your team good? Be ready for that. But you can steer it. You can just say, you can angle all these questions. Like a lot of time if you're like even on that question there, like if they asked you about sport and you weren't prepared, I'd just say like, Tom go Lorna Hort to me to hear starter leis an or test. I don't have the time at the moment studying with the Leaving Cert, and you can work the question back to the pressure of the Leaving Cert. So if they ask me anything about my hobbies or and like that, or do I have a part-time job and I didn't know too much, I could bring it back to the pressure of the Leaving Cert a lot, and I'm studying a lot at the moment and I just don't have the time for that. And then say maybe to race in a horde test before all them, Dul Harlar or whatever it is you wanted to do. So that's what I try and do on those questions.
There's a question from Matthew here. So first one from a lad. Well, I don't know, actually Leaving Cert 2021, God knows. But it says, any tips on how to compose yourself before the oral? I think you mentioned that a bit.
Yeah, but then even also the big thing is just don't be too serious. And remember again, I always try and stress them that we've always said to them days ago, I said, look, students from last year, so please find the higher level students, because the way our 50 years with level 6 as well. So find them, like you all know them, like ask them how they get on. If you know a random one, ask them what grades they get in higher level Irish in their oral, and you'll see they're always pleasantly surprised their grade in the Irish oral. And I know a few lads who came out of that exam last year who said it was an absolute disaster. And I've actually gone through the thing, I named them in the class because the lads don't care. Like I've said to them, I'm going to use you as examples. Then I say to students, please ask them how they got on. They'll tell you it wasn't that bad. So, but the main reason I want to do that is that I don't want people, I'd never be nervous going in, no matter what. Like remember this is the part of the exam that pulls up your grade. I've never ever met a higher level student that got lower than 60 on their oral. Like they're doing ordinary level if that's the case. They've already dropped down. So like even if it's this car crash of a thing, it's never as bad as it sounds. Like typically the average grade in higher level Irish in Ireland would be around 75, 78%. Nice. So remember, be confident going in. It's going to drive it in. Don't be too serious. Be really positive. There's no marks going for your personality, of course, but like if you're upbeat,
thank God.
If you're upbeat though, if you're positive, that the conversations just go better. Even if you've got a terrible joke to work in, like I have a stupid joke about you could say you robbed your brother's Kindle or something like that, and you can kind of use the moking of golf. If I got caught, I will be in big trouble or something like that. But like stuff like that, if you work at the odd joke, you can help. Sorry, that's the joke. It's a bit, but if you deliver it well, like you'll be all right. So, but
no, yes, that's great. You rose. Yeah, but I understand what you mean. I understand what you mean. That's
Even if you laugh, I'm telling you, like, even if you make a joke and you do, it's not that funny. If you laugh yourself, it makes you more relaxed and it just makes a better environment.
Kind of like when Kowser makes a joke. Most of the time they're not that funny. Some ones they are, but then he just goes.
The delivery
is
good, like, yeah. He relies on this delivery.
So if you went in and you said like, Dahi Olavisha Zanam Dum and just started laughing, right?
No, you got to be tactful. You have to work it in right, like and then on that though, what you said about the getting prepared. So like, don't be serious. Don't put yourself under pressure. And the weekend before is huge. Like if you're in the Monday, like be organised. Like find anybody, even if it's older brother, sister, son Irish, someone you just get someone to run through a couple of mock orals with you, just constantly talking in Irish. On the way, and then so the way you use your time, the run up to it's huge. Like even let's say and to make sure again, even if you've no one to help you in the Irish, do a few listenings. Listenings will get your head tuned in. Going on the way into school that day, be disciplined. Just listen to some Irish. It'll make the difference of 4 or 5 marks, 1%, which could pull you up and stuff. So be relaxed, drill into Irish, and but be organised with your notes as well. Like the night before the exam. Like I'd always stress students, try and have your notes wrapped up all by the end of February, and then you're not learning anything new off in March. You're just going over your basics. So you're not writing out notes. Sometimes students are trying to write out notes the weekend before the thing and then learn them off. It's very inefficient. Use your time. Get organised now. That's why I wouldn't mind in January now. I hope students aren't listening to this a couple months down the line by panicking. No. January, you've a bit of time. Get organised. Write out all your sample answers now. Get them up to your teachers. Get them corrected. And have a plan. Say like, right, by March, by 1st of March, I'll have everything in line. And then you're not learning anything new then, and just going over. It's huge boost for your confidence then. If you're going into the exam and all the notes you've done are all the things you've only been looking over the last 3 weeks, that's how you get good at it. Be careful about taking on to new stuff as well, because if you try and learn, let's say if I try and learn off a random paragraph on the day of the exam about me wanting to go on holidays next year to some place I've never covered, I'm not going over the basics that I've been working on the last few weeks. So get all that stuff out of the way. I'd stress,
Yeah. Just on that, before I ask you one last question, I know you got to go. There was when I was doing my first interview to be a teacher, I might have mentioned this before, I had to teach for the principal and the vice principal. So I actually I was quite nervous about it. Like it's something that I know and I could do it and it's fine, but I had to do junior cert science for them. So they wanted me literally to teach a class for 15 minutes and I was genuinely nervous. So what I did was I taught the class for an old teacher of mine. I taught the class for my parents. I taught the class for my girlfriend. And I did it all and I was like, cool, I actually know this off by heart. Like I can literally focus. I can literally be thinking about football and the stuff is just coming out of my mouth because it's just so second nature. But one of the things I was doing was, we were talking about, just briefly tell you, rip off a piece of paper, you get a biro, you rub it on your head, and the paper sticks to the thing. So I got to do a little activity in it, so I stood out. So I'd done it, I practiced it so many times, gone over sometimes in my head, I was so confident going in, and I got to that part of it was a bit weird to begin with, got to that part, I was like, wow, this is going very well, and I said, okay, so if you just rip off a little bit of piece of paper there, you get your biro, and you rub it on your hair, and then I only realised at the time then the principal had no hair. So completely bald, and I literally, my heart dropped. But because, and no, this is the actual point behind it, I was like, oh no, I rub it on your, but because I was so prepared in all other aspects, because I felt confident in what I was doing, I was able to say hair, and then I kind of just was composed to begin with, and then I said, or you could rub it on your jumper. Whereas I know that sounds easy now, but because I felt I had prepared in front of other people, I had made those mistakes in front of my parents, and being awkward in front of people I was more comfortable being awkward in front of, I was composed at the time to do it, so it might be similar. One last question.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It's really exactly the way you do it. Even if we see with teaching now, like if I'd have, let's say, made a mistake in class or anything like that 10 years ago, it would cripple you. Like, but now if you're doing something, you get something wrong on the board, you literally just laugh about it because you've done so many times, you're so much more confident with it. So, but you're dead right. It's exactly what happens to the orals. Like
the last one is actually from our mate Leaving Cert 2021 again. Well, there's a few more, but I just think this is a good one to round off on. Because a few people have similar stuff. It says, do you lose marks for mispronunciation? And then someone else asked, Justin asked about accent.
If he's not from Ireland.
If he's not from Ireland. So
pronunciation, correct yourself. If you you do it in anything, if you're talking English, you might say, if you phrase something wrong, you can correct yourself on the spot. Absolutely fine. Okay, so it's no problem at all. If you correct yourself, that's perfect. So if you know you made a mistake, that's the first thing I would say, correct yourself. With pronunciation though, like, I get what you mean, might be like if he's reading notes, he's not too sure how to translate them and stuff. My only advice there is like you'll get a lot, like if you're listening to a lot of even Irish authors, even the stuff that Shane's put up on YouTube, a lot of that, like that'll help you massively with the pronunciation. Listening to Irish a lot, even on like online, if you go on like folklore.ie, you can like, there's like the Irish website, folklore.ie, right? And you type in the word in English, word comes up in Irish. You can click on a little button that shows you how to pronounce it. So like, just if you're looking at a few words that are a bit funny or whatever, just type the thing in, then you can spell it in phonetically. Same thing with do you remember I said at the start they'll read out a poem? You can write whatever way you want to pronounce that. And then, and all that stuff, there's all those resources online as well.
Yeah.
Play them out, drill them in, hear them enough time. Get a lot of marks. And then the other thing as well.
So it does matter, sorry, the pronunciation, but you can fix it and you can work on it.
Yeah, and you've got the time to work on it now.
Yeah.
100%. It's like in English, how you pronounce stuff will affect your grade. It's definitely the same for Irish, yeah. So.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing though is like the accent matter. No, like they don't. Sometimes students put on this and like trying to pretend like they're from the Gaeltacht and stuff like that, and they put on like no, they just. Yeah. And they know as well, especially if you're not from Ireland, they know you're making a massive effort and they really respect that you're trying to learn the language. So, accent is fine. Pronunciation's important though. So don't. Yeah. No.
Perfect. So, bro, thanks very much.
No,
in summary, just to go over, the orals were 40%. 15 minutes. It's broken down into different parts. We have a 5-mark intro, 35 marks. You can basically have that in the bag for the 35 marks of the poem. You have 120 minutes open conversation. You told us what to structure that around. You gave us these different topics, and then we have the 20. That's 8 minutes, and then we've got the 4 minutes for the picture sets where you pick 1 out of 20, and you told us actually how to study them. You said, listen, I'm going to practice this, go through it in my head. If I mess up on a verb or something, I'll write that down and I start building my answers around that. And obviously loads of other good tips, and we answered a few people's questions. So, yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Rob.
No, more welcome. Absolutely.
Any final words, or just?
No, just remember it's a part of the exam that pulls up your grade. So typically with students, so don't be nervous going in.
And you can recycle, as we said, which is unbelievable. Yeah, the work now pays off twice.
Which is massive. You can get around the Irish paper that way by there's a big imbalance of how they allocate the marks, and that's nearly another thing in its own podcast, or whatever. But the only thing I would stress is that don't feel nervous going in. Do you remember there? It's going to pull up your grade, and then just say to yourself, no matter what, this is going to on average, this is going to pull up my Irish mark in the Leaving Cert. So I'd never be nervous going in. The examiner's on your side. They're very nice. They won't ask you tough questions. If you play at the worst case scenario, what if I draw a blank? Well, that's fine. Have your phrase ready straight away and you say that, and they work back. Only time thing I forgot to mention earlier as well is they will be looking out for the tenses as well. So make sure you can spot if they're asking you for like the past tense or the future tense or anything like that. Just make sure you've got. For students like Mo, can you look around like that? They will ask that. You want to be good at spotting that, So especially like if they ask you what are you doing next weekend, and you say about last weekend, you want to make sure you don't make those mistakes. So
perfect.
It's only other little things to look out for, and that's it.
Cool. So knock knock.
What? Is there?
Your brother's Kindle. Oh, sick! Got it. All right. Thanks, Rob. Thanks very much.